my dear friends of Cosmic Agency. My name is Gosia. Today I want to present to you this very interesting metaphysical video in which Yazhi is speaking to Robert about the concept of time and gravity and consciousness and other related topics. However, and that's why I'm here before this video, this is not the first time that Yazhi is talking about the concept of time. We actually have a very detailed video divided in various parts about what the time is. So I want to encourage you to watch those videos as well if you are interested in a detailed explanation of the concept of time, and I'm going to provide the links to those videos underneath the video in the description box. And now also she's going to mention the concept of gravity, how gravity is consciousness, how actually everything we see, the mass, the objects, the manifested objects, the manifested things are actually the result of gravity, which is the attention flow of the consciousness. And we also made videos about that. So what I encourage you to do, if you are interested in exploring the concept of gravity and how it relates to consciousness, go to our website and search that word gravity in the search engine that we have there, and the corresponding transcripts should come up. Because it's not just one video that was mentioning the gravity before, so I can't really pinpoint one specific one. It was various ones. So that's all I wanted to say. Enjoy the video, and I'm gonna see you, or maybe not, in the next one. So, you want to know what time is and why it can work in the reverse manner. To begin with, time is only an inseparable perception of consciousness. Without time, there is no consciousness, and without consciousness, there is no time. But it is not separate from consciousness.
Yes, and each consciousness has a different perception. But what I don't understand is how time works the reverse.
You cannot think, have self-awareness, without frames of reference or mental concepts. And it is those concepts, the ones that you order with your mind, which gives you the sensation of time. So it's just your thoughts. Time is just that. It does not exist as such. If time is just your thoughts, then it cannot function independently, which causes the perception of reverse time to be just an idea in your mind. So the direction of time flow just depends on what you are thinking. But thinking is the same in the end as creating your seemingly external reality. So, external reality is only your reflection, including time and apparent direction of flow. So time only has one direction, depending on your consciousness. And the more things you know, the more you reflect them in your outer world, even within the collective unconscious. That only complicates everything, but I'm not going there at this time. So, the more you know and understand, the more you can see and interpret what is apparently happening outside of you. Because by knowing more and having more awareness, you make more of the outside world according to your level. So, the direction of flow of time, be it forward, backward or sideways, because in itself the directions of time have no limit. They are not even three, as in angles x, y, z. Only depends on how developed your consciousness is. But for you, the perceptual direction of time will always be forward. And it will only be backwards or to the sides in reference to something else that you as an observer give it. It is in reference to some point of view. In that case, the effects happen before the causes. Because for your final understanding as consciousness and your mental evolutionary state, it allows you to see that everything is now. Everything is the same. Everything is interconnected. And you end up animating it according to your perception and understanding. Because in the end, there is no time, no space or matter. There is no material world. Everything is the astral. And the material, time, space, distance, mass are only your beliefs, ideas that you have become attached to as real. It's just your consciousness having mental cramps. You, the universe, is made of ideas, and just that.
So time is immeasurable? It just depends on each observing consciousness, right? Time is immeasurable. It is understood.
Yes, as time, something isolated, you can't measure it, just in reference to something else. Like within a group that has perception agreements of how things are. That is why they are in that group and not in another. So everyone there, more or less, perceives times in the same way.
Good. So there are perception agreements according to groups? Planet Earth with its perception, Planet Temra with its own. But how are these agreements made when a medium contacts a disembodied person if he or she perhaps has already been living on the Viera ship for 50 years and is not aware that his family on Earth wants to contact him? I don't know if this is the same subject, but perhaps it is easier to understand time with this example. Thanks.
It would have to be more or less some factor in time perception that is in common with that of the medium. Or else it just doesn't link or connect, as it happens most of the time. This depends more on the spirit than on the medium, although she must also have sensitivity to these frequencies, or she would not be a medium. And it is the spirit who remembers the agreements necessary to have the perception that links with someone alive, the medium. But the word spirit or soul I detest, because it suggests that I believe in it, and the truth is that I do not see it existing as so many other people say. What I see is that it is only a set of ideas that supports the concept of person. Whether he has a body or not does not define a person, but rather that set of ideas that is his self. A person point of attention is only defined by A. The range of your memory, how much you remember consciously and unconsciously. B. The ideas you have, concepts, and perception agreements at all levels. So, a spirit, soul, ghost, astral entity, all of these are just more bodies for me. Just that they are not from the group matrix that includes them in the collective idea, collective unconscious of the world of the living. So, removing all the other reasons to explain the phenomenon of apparitions or spirits, because there are many reasons, many of them very explainable, we are left with the concept that, yes, it is a person whom many call disembodied. The reason why many people remain as souls walking in cemeteries is because they still hold an idea of I that gives them an identity of being, as in existing apart from something else, others. So they still have bodies in their minds. And that perfectly explains the astral world that so many report. And they call that astral body. But I do not like to use names that others use, because I differ in everything, or almost. It does not define me, and only causes problems with understanding. I see this especially with the concept of soul.
So, all the formulas that contain time on Earth are wrong, or only can be sustained on Earth. With the above, you throw all human science to the ground.
I differ in almost everything with human science and with mythology and with the understanding of reality.
But you agree with Bruce Lipton and Carl Gustav Jung. With those, you somewhat agree.
Not with all.
In what no?
Lipton has not yet discovered that it is not only the mind that manages the body and programs genes, but there is no body and everything is mind. Jung was very successful in many things, especially in his perception of concepts, creating reality to the point of egregors and tulpas, which is not the same. An egregor is something like an entity. A tulpa is bigger, like a collective. But he still reached a limit separating matter and spirit, and he couldn't see their isolated points of view. He also had a very chaotic, unclear mind, which is reflected in his difficult writing, being that even I have already given up reading Jung in any language other than the original German. Second talk.
You said time. It is only an inseparable perception of consciousness. Without time, there is no consciousness, and without consciousness, there is no time. But it is not separate from consciousness.
Yes. What happens is just that we do not have words to describe what time really is. Because the very word time already gets us into the concept that time governs us, that it is something apart from us. You just have to see it as consciousness. Don't think about time itself. Just watch your thoughts. You have to think one thing, then another. And I mean to think without words, only with concepts. Then, by being aware that you have a thought, that you are that thought, you will see that there is a linearity in them. This is your time. Without it, you would not have the experience of thinking an idea, even with concepts. Then you go into meditation. And as many say, it is difficult to silence the mind. As the Buddhists say, the mind is the scandalous monkey that, like all good monkeys, only wants to attract attention while you are trying to be at peace. But let's say we remove the monkey. We go into deep meditation, space without time, from the point of view of your exterior. But still there you are in your own space-time. That is why it doesn't correspond in perception with the outside, because in deep meditation you can go 4 hours or more, or even 30 minutes in an instant. contrary to if you spend that time standing in a city corner. You are in your own space-time. And if you keep moving in that direction, then you will have an extracorporeal experience in the astral. But keep going, and you will realize that everything is the astral. And there, you can see that time is only tied to you, and only you. And it is only apparently the same by agreements with others.
Yes, but that deep meditation is still linked to a time, depending on your consciousness. Is there an evolutionary state of consciousness as such?
Yes, where you are only existing in meditation, only in the astral. It is when you realize that you are a being of light, although I do not like labels. And as a being of light, you can imagine whatever you want, and that is reality for you. And it is because there is no objective reality as such outside of you.
Does the being of light still have the concept of time?
Yes, but his own, just to know that he exists, by being aware of his own existence. Time is the last expression of duality, the last to disappear on the way back to source, to be the whole. You remove time, and only you remain without self-awareness, because time is your self-awareness. People hate time. It's never enough. How quickly my days go by. How short life is, they say. Others say that time is your companion that accompanies you on your journey through life. Time is only you. What happens in it, in your perception of personal time, is only the most faithful and accurate reflection of who you are. Time is you.
You don't contradict yourself in anything.
No, yes, I contradict myself a lot, and sometimes on purpose, because even contradictions are valid and hold truths. Very few people can think in concepts. Socrates used to say, not Eleanor Roosevelt as others say, weak minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and strong minds discuss ideas. And I add that the strongest minds can discuss and think in multiple layers of ideas, even in contradiction, and put everything together in one mass of logic, and from there to discuss and think about concepts from multiple angles, contradictory points of view or not. And with that, a whole universe can be formed in your head, like playing chess with an infinite number of levels, whatever you want.
Yes. You also said that gravity is consciousness too. And is it also time? Gravity is the product of consciousness, time.
It is your attention, where you are directing it. Let's say that hard matter is liquid water, and gravity is water in vapor, being pushed in a flow or direction, flux, which, with the right conditions, like glass, will condense into water. So gravity is a flow of potential energy in a very high vibratory state that are the thoughts of a consciousness that will later materialize in some object. So you are also generating gravity, and you direct it to where you are thinking. So a large object like a planet does not generate gravity by having a mass, as human science states, but rather the reason why so much gravity is concentrated at that point in space is why that planet is manifesting there. Gravity generates the planet, not the other way around. Gravity being a flow, flux, yes, it is tied to the perception of time of the consciousness that generates it.
You said you cannot think, have self-awareness, without frameworks or mental concepts. And it is these concepts that you're ordering with your mind. What gives you the sensation of time? So those reels of film that are given lifelike movement by a consciousness observer would be disordered at first, not ordered from a beginning to end, but would be disordered, and it is you who with your thoughts and frames of reference and concepts would order them, and that is what gives you the feeling of time. But you would go ordering them with multiple endings, beginnings, and outcomes, etc., yes?
Yes, you explain it well. Yes, because you are consciously ordering your thoughts. This one, then another, and yet another doesn't follow but after those other two. So you are generating them as thoughts to which you give order, as you say, in a sequence that corresponds a criterion of ideas that you have or have developed. And that's another way of explaining the inexplicable, time.
Do you give them order according to timelines?
You can say that, yes. But for me, they are more the consequence of ideas you have about how things are at all times. How you should look, how you should dress. However, these thoughts are not only yours. Many times, they are mostly of other people. They come from the field of collective consciousness where you are. So you will have the feeling of being a slave or victim of time, because it is the average of those around you, and they have a strong influence on you. But this is because you have agreed to be part of that matrix of perception that generates collective time. But even so, the time in a collective is always individual. It is only apparently the same, but never the same.
So that's why you can make yourself older and smaller, because you master that, right?
Yes, because they will see me here, but I'm still in the astral. That is why I say that technically I am not alive. I don't follow linearity like the others. I am only a girl because I decided to be so. I am not a part of collective agreement. I have my own.
Yes, interesting.
I am the baby. I am the girl. I am the grandmother, and I am the ancient one. And so I am at will, which is why many people report having seen me as an adult at times. But that's what I do, because I operate from outside agreements. My body only reflects my mind, as it happens with you too, and with everyone.
The collective unconscious doesn't affect you exactly. You are not conditioned.
And it doesn't affect me because I see it, I observe it, I dissect it, I know what it is and why it is. It does not affect me because I see that they are only ideas.
Interesting that you can make the collective unconscious not affect you. So, what you think will dictate what time is? Example: negative thoughts delay time, and the positives shrink it. What thoughts affect the perception of time and consciousness the most, and why does that happen?
Time does not work independently because it doesn't exist. It is again an idea
that arises from a consciousness that tries to explain why it is self-conscious. It is not about which ones stretch or contract time, whether they are positive or negative thoughts. It's not that easy. But some can be perceived as such. For example, watching a good movie makes time pass very quickly in your perception. But waiting for a bus that never arrives, in the rain, in the cold, makes the perception lengthen. But again, it is letting oneself be taken away by a collective perception, by the soup of perceptions of the points of attention consciousness in the collective, of the collective. Because you could control it in the same way, being that they are positive or negative thoughts, since they are only positive or negative in context to something else, which is again just ideas. Whether or not they suit you, for example, those thoughts. So this way, yes, we could say that from your specific point of view, having positive thoughts and being in extreme happiness will always allow you to accelerate the perception of time, which in turn will allow you to once again have the feeling that your time has run out, unless you live in a context without external frames of reference, such as living in a society that has a collective. But you can be in happiness and in a state of contemplation simultaneously. With that, slowing down perception at will. And I have done this because I have had extreme practice with it. And if your mind can handle perception being expanded, you can perceive time in multiple directions of flow, not just forward.
In this 3D.
Density is your mind. It doesn't matter where your body is, because either way, you have a body in other densities, because there is no body. It's just your ideas.
Okay. You said, so the more things I know, the more I reflect them in my outer world. Okay. But the more things I know, it would be to reach a state of mind that we would call to understand each other, a D. So having a state of mind due to the limitation of knowing more things and reflecting them in my outer world, would living in this 3D limit us in some way to live time in only one direction? Because we are living all of this according to our perception and our understanding.
You are limited living in the so-called 3D only because you consciously and unconsciously agree for it to affect you. But it does not have to affect you if you get out of those agreements. I, for example, am within the collective spatial-temporal perception of the Tibetans. However, I continue to do whatever I want with time and space, because I do not agree with perceiving reality as they do.
You said, and it will only be reverse or to the sides in reference to something else that you as an observer give it. Can the effects happen to me consciously before the causes?
Again, it is a question of the point of view from where you want to answer this question. Remember that with me, you will never have a single response, but a whole building of responses, each floor with a different one. Each floor a point of view, a world, a matrix of agreements. They change, contradict each other, but in the end, they are the whole. I have no unique answers. My mind doesn't work like that.
Are there degrees of consciousness or levels of consciousness? From what you say, I think so. But why are some consciousnesses more evolved than others? Or it's not so?
Seen from the matrix or group of 3D agreements, for lack of better names, because I do not accept the existence of densities as such, or from other low density, such as the 5D, yes, there are degrees of consciousness or spiritual progression. From the higher point of view, closer to the absolute, one just is, and it is only one grade of the total consciousness, the source, the one that understands and includes everything. And the degrees of consciousness are only the result of self-imposed limitations of that whole. What would be a point of attention consciousness called person, since I no longer like the word soul. And a degree of consciousness is a self-contained point of attention with self-imposed limits by the attachments of perception that that person has. That is to say, attachments to ideas are what limit, define, and create a point of attention, consciousness, which is a person, which is a soul, and in turn, it is a timeline, a density, and a degree of spiritual progression for each person point of attention consciousness soul. That is what a person is. The whole, having ideas and attachments to these ideas.
You say, in reference to something else. And that depends on what I think or what I might think depending on my consciousness. And the more things that I know, that is what will create my reality that I will reflect in my external world, because it is my reflection, and with it, I will be able to have the perceptual direction of the time I want. Correct?
Basically, yes. The more awareness you have in general, the more you understand about what the world is, the one that is perceived as exterior to you. And by understanding more, then the unexplained things, or the things that were not even known to be there but always were there, will begin to be seen, understood, and their relationship with everything else. And it is from that point where it begins to be seen in the same daily life that one can have several directions of flow in time. Svaru said that the densities had nothing to do with the dimensions. I say that the higher the density, the greater consciousness, the more dimensions are understood and seen. On Earth, it is said that there are 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. This defines very well the 3D matrix, its scientists, its values and limitations as a culture. In other advanced races outside in the cosmos, it is understood that there are 3 dimensions in space and 3 in time. Since there are 3 dimensions in space that are represented by the axis X, Y, Z, and 3 dimensions in time as well, represented in the same way, where it can be seen that the temporal arrow is not perceived as flowing in only one direction, according to the differences of each person point of attention consciousness soul observer. So, 3D, 3 dimensions in space and 1 in time. 5D, 3 dimensions in space and 3 dimensions in time. Huge difference, and it is what I have been explaining here. but 3D dimensions in space and 3D dimensions in time. That is also a limitation of socially acceptable context by advanced interstellar races. Another belief system, more attachments to systems and mathematical models. More expanded than in 3D, but still a box limitation. Because by accumulating more awareness and more insight and wisdom, accepting new mental models, new concepts, which do not replace old ones, but that enrich, creating more steps, more floors in our building of perceptual consciousness, one starts to perceive that time and space have more dimensions, to infinity. So if we can represent the perception of time in a more basic way in 3D as a simple forward arrow, immovable and inflexible, in 5D could be represented as a sphere, expanding in all directions, which we can also represent mathematically, for this example, as a cube, x, y, z. But as we have more awareness, the greater the ability to observe connections and to understand cause and effect, suddenly seeing time as this, or more and more complicated the more we grow, to the degree that space and time become an ultra-complex geometric object where you realize that every observable point in time is intertwined and interconnected with the others. Nothing is isolated. That everything interferes with everything. That what is thought in Aldebaran reflects in Centauri, and so on everywhere. As it increases even more, it is perceived as a single mass, not even as interconnected points in a cosmic space-time cobweb that encompasses everything, but a solid, massive, endless geometric object that covers everything, the all, the source, the ether from which emerges what is perceived as isolated things from an observation point of view of duality. That something is different from something else. At this point, there is no longer duality, only the all, the source, the incomprehensible, immeasurable, eternal ether, which has no limits, which never began and will never end.
Thank you. It is clear that soul is not the correct word. It is rather a point of attention consciousness with self-imposed limits by attachments. It is well understood.
Yes, exactly. Just that it is not a word, it is a description. But soul does not serve us here because it confers loaded concepts that do not correspond to what I want to say or explain here. Because a soul is not a thing that is floating around and is from God, as they say, and which is the astral body, as others say. That for me is just another body. Ghosts, spirits, astral body, all these are bodies. Therefore, something and not the other. And I also said, formed by ideas. And answering the unasked question, I developed this using only mind. And I do not advise the use of drugs. Because I know that for many people what I say sounds like an acid trip, but it only reflects the narrowness of their minds.
You don't need them. I imagine that here, they do it to somehow potentiate their consciousness. I don't know.
It opens them to perceive things that are outside their normal perception range. But since they got there artificially, they don't understand, nor can they handle it. They are not prepared, and they get hurt.
They got there artificially, and they see it all in a chaotic, psychedelic, and messy way, without apparent sense.
Beside that, they are overloading the body, the neural networks and their neurotransmitters, causing permanent damage, although sometimes not noticed, but it is there, and taking away the possibility of developing those skills naturally. My abilities do not come from controlling the matter of my body. Rather, I operate from the outside, from higher densities where I perceive myself as energy, and from there, by understanding the most basic densities, so I form an apparently physical body to interact with all of you. But I am not physical. I just appear to be. But you must understand that this is what you do too. With a sufficiently evolved and powerful mind, you bend space-time at your convenience and whenever you want. Space and time are the same again. Inseparable. Ideas in a mind.